Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's podcast. So today we are talking all about one of the scariest things that many practices struggle with, and that is switching billing teams. And I certainly recognize it's a big decision. And I think I hear pretty much every time I talk to a new practice, kind of those same fears every single time and those hiccups that you're concerned about when it comes to making a change. And in fact, more than 70% of our transitions we've managed have not only protected revenue, but actually increased collections, sometimes as high as 35% within those first 90 days. But there is, some truth around the myths we're talking about in terms of having the right plan, having the right partner, and the right communication tool. I say this all the time, both to our current clients and our own team, that we are one team with the practice. And so we have to have the tools and the approach to make sure everybody understands we're one team. We're all in the same, plan. If a practice doesn't succeed, we don't succeed. And in protecting revenue and is one of the most important things for a practice and really helps make sure that they have the confidence and clarity to make a change. And so having these myths talked about and openly discussed is really, really important when you are considering making a change with your billing team. So the first myth, which I think is probably the most common, right, which is our revenue will drop if we switch. And it's the number one fear. It's understandable, right? Oftentimes, profits within a practice are tight. And so having 1 or 2 or 3 months of lower revenue just isn't sustainable. And here's the reality, right? So insurance claims, as you guys know, typically are paid kind of in a 20 to 45 days after submission. We try and lean to where that average day of payment is in that 20 to 30-day range. Industry average is actually in the 40-day range. We try and squish that as much as possible. So it means in those first months of a transition, right, your revenue is really almost entirely from the claims submitted before the switch. So if you make a switch at September 1st and you're, having money coming in the first, second, and third of the month, right after that switch, that money coming in is related to claims that were submitted typically by the old billing team for claims for prior dates of service. And so it's really important to have a concrete plan is how that old AR is going to be managed, depending on if that being done by the old team or, a new billing team, and getting a really strong plan around expectations on timelines for that old AR and assigning FTEs to that old AR. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because I think it's one of the most critical things for everybody to understand. Old AR coming from a different billing team can be, a lot of work. And so you all have to be on the same page of understanding how many claims are there, what are the number of FTEs that are going to be assigned to that, and how is that project going to be run separately from an FTE standpoint than the individuals who are running the day-to-day claims for the new work moving forward. So again, really, really important to first assess all the outstanding claims as part of this transition plan, prioritize those high dollar and timely filing deadlines, again, by claim. So highest dollar to lowest dollar, working through payers that have a short timely filing as much as you can, recognizing that if you have thousands of claims that need to be touched from an old AR perspective, that there may be situations where you have timely filing happen. Just depends on how many people the practice is willing to assign from an FTE perspective. Because typically those old AR projects are kind of a separate project compared to, the percentage work that the new claims moving forward would be. Really, really important to typically have a weekly touch point. So you're working with the practice and the billing team on a weekly basis in those first, early 2-3 months to get that old AR addressed. And sometimes old AR can drag on for months. And again, it just comes down to how many FTEs is it worth assigning to those. Old AR claims kind of come in different flavors, right? They could be claims that you've already received money for that need payments posted. So that's a very timely process of calling the payer, finding the EOB either on a payer portal or having to call the insurance directly, which is the worst case scenario, so that you can get those payments posted. And it's so painful when the money's already hit the checking account for the physician to then have to then be posting that payment when that cleanup work is just not value add in terms of adding additional money to the checking account. A lot of times we'll get in there and the old AR has old eligibility or old coding denials that just were never addressed. And that comes down to the communication plans between the office and the billing team, right, to have an issue tracker or some sort of mechanism so that things don't get lost in emails and that there's always a tracking system to see how those are going to be resolved. We had one practice that we took over, had over 700 ignored rejections. And so within 45 days, their cash flow was not only stabilized, but within 90 days, they were up by 25% based on those just dealing with rejections on a timely manner. And a lot of those rejections were easy things to fix, but things that needed somebody to sit down and actually fix them. And so with the right structure, of course, you can have a practice transition billing teams that won't have revenue that's lost. Oftentimes, actually, revenue goes up because you're dealing with that old AR quickly. If you, again, stabilize, the right number of FTEs for that project, and then revenue will then hit a new steady state based on constantly hitting the deadlines to get those claims managed timely. All right. So myth number 2. Our staff already know our quirks. No new team will get it. Practices often worry that, their workflow or their process that they have in place is unique for them or unique for, billing in general. And to have somebody teach that or learn that workflow may take time. I would say that for 95% of our practices, even though, you may think it's different, a lot of those hold certain patterns, right? We know, claims need to be signed off, claims need to be scrubbed, rejections need to be managed, eligibility issues that we find need to be managed, training of front desk needs to happen, and patient payments need to be posted. And then reporting out on all of this progress on a monthly basis. And so we have a really good transition process where we're going through each of those unique situations and understanding, are there nuances there that we need to learn? Typically that happens within a 1 or 2 phone calls. And again, we're touching on those during those weekly transition calls so that if there are issues, say with eligibility, we're sending a policy and procedure or having our managers meet with the front office so that they understand and can plan for re-education if it's necessary. Now, of course, there's always risks, right? You do want to document these workflows, but at the end of the day, if those are documented and the staff are trained, then oftentimes this is actually one of the least concerns of us when we take over a practice. As long as we just understand what the current process is and we have good touch points, again, we're all one team, and it's really, really important for everybody to feel as like we're all one team. That is a required element when we take on a new practice, is that we are not coming in as just a vendor. We're coming in as your partner, and we all want to work together to get the revenue that the practice needs. Because again, if the practice isn't paid, we aren't paid. And that's really, designed to help make sure that we're all aligned and make sure that, if there are major errors, that we're all fixing those together. I think it's really, really important that we also think about workflows in a way that makes us understand that sometimes there are habits that were put into place by a prior team, but that may not be the best process moving forward. And we have to discuss and understand what the right process looks like. And that's why we have, managers on our team, all of which who have 10, 15, 20 plus years experience each, in order to really understand, what's going on in the practice, what are some recommendations from other practices, and how can we all get to the end goal the same, which is, having really, low AR over 90 days, getting those claims paid as quickly as possible. We had one practice that told us that their quirk was holding all secondary claims until the patients had followed up. Obviously not the right approach right now. We want those secondary claims to follow directly after the primary claims. This was something that was, delaying payments for the practice. We were able to correct that within the system and kind of educate around this. And obviously reimbursements and payments caught quickly up to be in line with industry standards, and even better than industry standards. So we certainly recognize that there are certain processes in a workflow that may be working and some that may need some expertise, especially when it comes to EDI enrollments and software setup. We just need to make sure that we understand why it was set up that way, provide recommendations. So again, the end goal is just for you to get paid sooner and quicker as you can. So myth number 3, it's too much work to switch. Certainly recognize that nobody wants the administrative burden that comes around a transition, right? The meetings, getting everybody set up on the payer portals. But the truth is most of the work does fall on our team, though we do expect kind of to have a partner in this when it comes to resolving some of those issues that we may need help with. So we do try and limit the work on a practice. Obviously, those few structured calls ahead of time to work through those workflows, getting those payer portal access, and then answering questions kind of on that weekly basis as much as possible so that we can get into a good groove. And then those calls typically decrease over time to where you're meeting every other week or once a month, depending on the practice needs. We certainly, recognize that a lot of this has to do with enrollments and between the payer and the software, maybe even an EFT setup, clearinghouse connections, payer communications, and all of that is stuff that our team takes on. I would say if you don't have access or aren't the admin of your payer portals, that's kind of one of the things that can be more time consuming. We help walk you through that, and our staff will help make sure that you get to be admin, because I think that's one of the most critical things that you and your team can have. So, certainly if you're looking at your metrics and you have high old AR, or you have, payment issues, denials that are piling up, then staying with that billing team is not going to get you or your practice where it needs to be from a financial standpoint. And that puts both you and your patients at risk in terms of just a thriving practice. So if you're already spending time chasing, answers or fixing mistakes or stressing about revenue, then obviously switching could lighten that load. Once you get through those initial transition calls, it does get easier and easier. All right, so myth number 4, let's talk about patient balances. There's a lot of concern that, how will patient balances be managed? And so let's put this into 2 buckets. And I've done several podcasts on patient AR. But you think of patient AR, right? We've got our old patient AR, right? So how old does it go back? Do you have a plan around collections? Are we sending statements currently today? And, really making sure that those patient statements are accurate, the old ones, so that you can send patient statements, get into a groove of patient statements, and then be able to have some process around if you are going to send to collections, making sure that you alert us of that so that we can do the necessary write-offs in the software. It's also important to recognize patient credits are an important part to understand. Do you have a lot of refunds that are due? There are a lot of state regulations that dictate how soon you have to refund those patients. So you really want to make sure that you have a good handle on patient refunds as well, and make sure that you have an ability to refund patients and that your state regulations when it comes to these things. So when we take over a practice, we're obviously reviewing past patient statements, understanding your collection process. Typically, we'll provide a collection report, but we are looking for the practice to alert us if they are going to send those patients to collection, because it is on the practice to kind of send them. And we highly recommend practices calling on those patient collections, patient debts first, so that they can then decide if they're really going to put the patient under collection. And then having the collection agency, which will typically send a pre-collection letter, and having that balance written off in the EMR once that patient has been sent to collections, because you're not going to want to continue to send them statements, and certainly the collection agency is not going to have you do that. Obviously, if a balance looks inaccurate, we have to pause sending patient statements until that data is clean. So then that comes back down to that old AR body of work. We've seen practices where we've gone into a practice where instead of a balance flipping to a secondary insurance payment, it was flipping to a patient balance. So those patient balances looked like they were real, but in reality, when working the old AR, they were actually needing to be sent to a secondary insurance carrier. And so that can not only make patients really upset, but also slow down your ability to get paid the insurance information. So setup of an EMR practice management software is really, really important. And that's why, fixing the old AR, having, 1 or 2 FTEs that are assigned to that old AR, including patient AR, get that cleaned up as quickly as possible, and then transition to where you're kind of in steady state is really, oftentimes the best plan. I know it feels painful, but otherwise, revenue will continue to stall. And if you do have denials and you do have old AR, it will continue to grow. So this is really the best opportunity to get that patient AR under control, get a new plan around patient statements, and cleaning up that data and getting that process going in the right direction. Obviously, the other part of that patient AR is the process around your front desk, right? What are they collecting up front when it comes to patient payments? So copays, deductibles, et cetera. Are they collecting that up front? Typically, when we collect that or have the office collect that information or that payment, we're having it sit unapplied. And so that sits ready for a claim to be adjudicated. Once the EOB comes back, we know patient responsibility. We assign that patient payment to that specific date of service. And then if there's a credit left over, it can be applied to an older date of service where there's a balance, or that's where that process where the office needs to send that patient refund back to the patient. And sometimes that's, within 30 days. Sometimes you have a longer period of time, but refunds are really, really important. All right, what happens to our old AR? And I know I kind of touched on this when we talked about, just revenue dips, but I think this is important to touch on again because it's one of the most stressful things for us. It's one of the most stressful things for a practice. It's one of the things that I think keeps us all up at night. And it doesn't just disappear. Someone has to work it. And we've typically give practices kind of 2 options, right? So the first option is the old billing team works down the backlog while we handle the new claims. And some old billing teams may have this within their contract, right? So that they're going to want to work that old AR. And so in our preferences is if they're capable, have them work the old AR, right? So if your problem with them is about communication and metrics and just their overall knowledge about billing, then and they're capable of working the old AR, have them do it because a lot of times they started the mess that's there. So have them clean up the mess. Obviously, they're going to still need your help as the practice because if there are eligibility issues, that is typically handled by the front desk. And so you're having to manage those issues together. And you do have to have a good communication tool in place between the two of you. We need the practice's help when we manage those. And I'm sure the old billing team will too. Now, the second option is that we take over the old AR directly, but we do this with a defined manpower plan. So we typically say, okay, you have, 2,000 claims. We suggest 2 FTEs for a period of this many months. And we kind of carve that out as a separate project. And it is, the more painful of the process, just because you do want to make sure that those claims are cleaned up appropriately. It's calling insurances, it's going onto payer portals, it's fixing eligibility issues, fixing denials, submitting medical records. And so this is the most time consuming, especially if it has built up over months or even years. So we certainly always prioritize high dollar to and near dollar or near deadline claims first. And then we work kind of methodically through the lower dollars and those with the longer timely filing, deadlines. So again, I know nobody likes this discussion. It's not the sexy part of running a practice, but it is the part that gets you your money. And if handled correctly, tens of thousands of dollars can be recovered. But the longer you wait to make a transition and the longer that AR gets, and the older the AR gets, the more likely you're going to have to write that off for timely filing. So just get that dealt with as soon as possible. We do really need to make sure that, practices are, working with us on, getting the issues resolved. And this takes partnership. And I cannot stress this enough. Like we really don't consider ourselves an outsourced partner. We have an amazing, incredible team of managers and director of operation who really care about our practices. But we need a partnership to have transparency about the current processes, even if they're messy. Like we can help clean those up together, but we need to all be on the same page. I'm really against kind of pointing fingers at either the old billing team or the front office or the new billing team. Like again, we're all on one team. Like I'm a big proponent that it's not a process, right? It's not a person, it's a process, right? So there's no one person that should be blamed for anything that happened in the past. It's really about identifying a problem with a process, fixing the process, and moving forward. And I that takes partnership. Obviously, engagement with calls or answering eligibility issues if we've identified those, teaching the front desk, like all of those things, again, take partnership and communication. And so hopefully, kind of chatting through these myths make you feel like, okay, I get it. I understand these. I can do this. And if you're sitting here going, oh, my billing team's got it, they're doing a great job. These hopefully are tips that you can think through to monitor for those amazing billing teams that you have. Because at the end of the day, when you do have successful metrics, successful revenue, and a successful practice, you feel less stressed. You can focus on your patients, which at the end of the day is what everybody wants. And if you do have to make a transition, you want to make sure that you have peace of mind knowing that your revenue is protected, that you have clarity with trustworthy, accurate metrics, that you have confidence that the denials are being worked consistently, and really just the ability to wake up and practice medicine the way you want. So if you have been feeling frustrated with your current billing team, afraid of switching, we get it. Making sure that you have the right partner. We do denial audits and AR audits for practices that are considering switching. We do that at no cost for those practices that are earning $150,000 a month in net receipts. And so reach out, head on over to NatRevMD and schedule a call with us. And myself or one of our team members will meet with you and kind of go over what those metrics look like and how you can kind of be in a better situation moving forward with just a few quick and easy changes. All right. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.